Hypothalamus Artificial Intelligence, HI, and Research Center for Advanced Decision Technologies, RCADT, presents the conference. The Big Difference Between Artificial Neural Nets and Artificial Brains. Brief lecture edited by Jesus Velasquez Bermudez. Artificial Brains. A new way of thinking about artificial intelligence. Artificial Neural Nets. In 1943, Warren McCulloch and Walter Pitts created the concept of artificial neural networks. They published the article, A Logical Calculation of the Ideas Immanent in Nervous Activity. McCulloch and Pitts tried to explain how the brain could produce highly complex patterns, by using many basic cells that are connected. Neural networks were growing, and in practice they took the name of artificial intelligence. They were also called machine learning. Starting from the perceptron, the first artificial neuron created, the knowledge of neuronal modeling has evolved, currently having multiple types of artificial neural nets, specialized in performing specific pattern recognition. For this, the basic patterns of ANNs are modified. For example, convolutional artificial neural networks correspond to ANNs specialized in identifying certain types of patterns, such as images. The image presents an example of an ANN oriented to recognize images of numbers written freehand. The result is a discrete indicator associated to the number read. The state-of-the-art of artificial intelligence is the Generative Pre-trained Transformer, GPT. It's a type of large language model, an LLM, and the framework for generative artificial intelligence. It is an artificial neural network used by machines in natural language processing, which is based on the Transformer deep learning architecture, pre-trained using large datasets of unlabeled text, and that can generate novel human-like content. A LLM is a machine learning model that can understand, generate, and translate human language. LLMs are trained on massive amounts of data, such as text from the internet. They can be used for a variety of natural language processing, NLP tasks. Most LLMs have these characteristics and are sometimes widely referred to as GPTs. Artificial General Intelligence, AGI, is a hypothetical type of highly autonomous artificial intelligence, AAI, that would match, or exceed, human capabilities in most, or all, economically valuable cognitive work. It contrasts with narrow AI, which is limited to specific tasks. Super Artificial Intelligence, ASI, on the other hand, refers to AGI that far exceeds human cognitive capabilities. The creation of AGI is a primary goal of AI research in companies like OpenAI, Google, and Meta. A 2020 survey identified 72 active AGI research and development projects in 37 countries. The timeline for achieving AGI remains a topic of ongoing debate. As of 2023, some argue that it may be possible in years or decades, others argue that it could take a century or more, a minority believes that it may never be achieved, and another minority claims that it is already here. The Nobel laureate in physics for his work in AI, Geoffrey Hinton, has expressed concern about the rapid progress towards AGI, suggesting that it could be achieved sooner than many expect. There is debate about the exact definition of AGI and whether modern LLMs, like GPT-4, are early forms of AGI. There is controversy over whether AGI poses an existential risk. Many AI experts have stated that mitigating the risk of human extinction posed by AGI should be a global priority. Others consider that the development of AGI is too remote to think about such a risk. In 2024, John Hopfield and Geoffrey Hinton were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physics for their foundational contributions to machine learning, particularly through their work on artificial neural networks. The image presents the most detailed map of the brain of an animal ever mapped, a fruit fly. Several research teams have mapped this organ for the first time in an adult specimen, which contains about 140,000 neurons, and more than 50 million connections. Fruit flies share 60% of human DNA, and 3 out of 4 human genetic diseases have a parallel. Therefore, understanding their brains is one more step toward understanding the brains of larger, more complex species, such as humans. Its brain may look small, it has about 1 million fewer neurons than the human organ, but a fruit fly can see, smell, hear, walk and fly. In addition, they socialize, navigate and learn from the experience. Trying to determine how this tiny brain works involves estimating at least 50 million parameters that represent its connections, plus the current flows between them. Parameters is a synonym for weights, which is the term most used for the parameters of a neural network. Batch size, learning rate, etc. are hyperparameters, which basically means that they are specified by the user, while weights are what the learning algorithm will learn through training. According to multiple sources, ChatGPT-4 has approximately 1.8 trillion parameters. Given the approach of trying to achieve artificial general intelligence, AGI, by estimating a neural supernetwork, part of the effort is concentrated on the supercomputers needed for this simultaneous estimation of parameters. This will always be a constraint on the growth of AI. It should be noted that the seminal concept of artificial neural networks, proposed by McCulloch and Pitts, in 1943, is still the general approach of AI. He does not find in the literature efforts aimed at giving AI the ability to understand complex mathematical processes, which accurately explain the real world, which is necessary for decision-making that benefits all humanity. The research work continues with AI based on the estimation of data-driven supermodels, without advancing to a hybridization of concepts and visions. Artificial brains are an invention of He, due to their expertise in complex modeling. Artificial brains are the next methodological step for artificial intelligence, that is still stuck in neural network-based modeling, based on data processing, ignoring precise mathematical models. He is not aware of mathematical models developed with this approach. Artificial brains come from neuroscientific studies. The construction of the artificial cortex determines the connectivity of the artificial neurons, which are associated with the atoms of the system. Artificial brains emulate the structure of the brain and use it to build the mathematical models. The creator of the human brain conceived it as the integration of three main organs, or systems: neocortex, hypothalamus and hippocampus. The hypothalamus is part of the thalamus. McCulloch and Pitts theory, which has existed for more than 80 years, has proven to be totally successful, and based on it the current state of artificial intelligence has been reached, which we could say are GPT methodologies. However, Velasquez-Bermudez's work, spanning 35 years of research and technological development, has resulted in artificial brains, which are a new way of thinking about artificial intelligence. The image shows a close-up of the human brain showing the activation of neurons and neuronal extensions of the limbic system, mammillary pituitary gland, amygdala, thalamus, cingulate gyrus, corpus callosum, hypothalamus. This indicates that the human brain is composed of groups of neurons which in turn are composed of groups of lower-level neurons, or individual basic neurons, called by He the atoms of the system. The central idea of the artificial brain is to build an artificial intelligence that mimics the human brain, leaving aside the approach of trying to represent the entire brain using a single network of artificial neurons. The structure of an artificial brain is made up of the artificial hypothalamus, hippocampus, and cortex, all of which perform functions like human equivalents. In mathematical models, it is common to use a matrix that establishes the relationship between columns with variables and equations with rows. These matrices are scattered. This is the basis of cortical modeling. Artificial brains extend traditional artificial intelligence by generating decision-making artificial intelligence based on prescriptive analytics. The connection between all the subsystems, within and between them, is made by bioneurons. For this, biological neural networks are formed, through which information flows in the brain, and in general in the human body. The neocortex contains millions of neurons that communicate with each other, to capture the world that occurs around the human being. The connectivity of these neurons does not occur based on a dense network, that connects all neurons to each other. Connectivity is based on a sparse network, which can be assimilated to a sparse array. The artificial brains corresponds to the scientific foundations, more specifically mathematical fundamentals, that allow to connect multiple mathematical models, algorithms or robots, exchanging information between them to obtain a common goal, and act as holistic intelligence of the organizations, or parts therein. Like the human brain, the artificial brain is composed of the following artificial components: neocortex, hypothalamus, and hippocampus. Emphasizing that Hai is not an expert in neuroscience, its interpretation of the functioning of the brain is presented. The cerebral cortex stores all the connectivity of the neural networks that make up the brain. The hypothalamus is the organ that ensures the proper functioning of the human being. The connectivity of neurons in the cortex determines how the hypothalamus should function. The hippocampus is responsible for managing memory, which interacts with the hypothalamus, to determine the actions that the human being will perform, that is, decisions. Artificial entrepreneurial brains are based on these hypotheses. Donald Oldingheb is best known for his theory of Hebbian learning, which he introduced in his classic work The Organization of Behavior in 1949. Hebb has been described as the father of neuropsychology and neural networks. The central concept of Hebb's theory is summed up in the phrase, cells that fire together, wire together. According to this idea, when an A neuron is repeatedly involved in the activation of a B neuron, the synapses between them are strengthened. This principle is important for understanding how the artificial hippocampus works. This principle suggests that the concurrence of neural activity is the basis for learning and memory. Synaptic strengthening: when a presynaptic neuron and a postsynaptic neuron are activated simultaneously, the connections between them are strengthened. Activity-dependent plasticity: the efficiency of synaptic connections is not static but can be modified as a function of neuronal activity. This plasticity is essential for adaptive learning and memory. The central concept of Hebb's theory is summed up in the phrase, cells that fire together, wire together. According to this idea, when an A neuron is repeatedly involved in the activation of a B neuron, the synapses between them are strengthened. According to Hebb's theory, 1950, we learn if we form new synaptic connections between neurons. Learning is a new relationship that is created between neurons, and remembering is to keep that relationship socially active. When we are learning something new, neurons from different brain regions communicate with each other. With more exposure and practice over time, your brain creates stronger, more efficient communication between neurons. From the point of view of Hai, one part of the artificial hippocampus processes the information stored in the other part, to develop a learning process. Learning takes the form of the generation of new neural connections, which must be stored in the artificial cerebral cortex, to be used in the future by the artificial hypothalamus. This high vision of artificial intelligence, built from the workings of the human brain, is currently unique in the world. From the point of view of Hai, one part of the artificial hippocampus processes the information stored in the other part, to develop a learning process. Learning takes the form of the generation of new neural connections, which must be stored in the artificial cerebral cortex, to be used in the future by the artificial hypothalamus. This high vision of artificial intelligence, built from the workings of the human brain, is currently unique in the world. The hippocampus: storage structures and processes from the decision-making that must be faced permanently. The artificial hippocampus is based on the mathematical synthesis of the information generated by algorithms and problem-solving processes, to use it in new runs of these algorithms to speed up the problem solution in real time. Artificial hippocampus store, like in the humans, the experience, and the knowledge acquired over time. While mathematical models on digital computers, and the data storage disks, date back many years, more than 60 years, and despite the Industrial Revolution 4.0, how to run a model, it does not seem to have evolved. The normal process is: the model is thinking monolithically. A high-performance solver is selected to solve the problem, and the results are post-processed, and the results of the models are stored, with administrative purposes. Usually, in the next run, the model starts from scratch, ignoring the past, that is, it has no memory. In some cases, it is heated from a starting point provided by the last run, presumably the last optimal solution, or a point that ensures feasibility. However, an artificial hippocampus, designed for the artificial brain, can take advantage of a lot of information produced within a run, and during the history of all runs. Two examples will be briefly presented: handling of Bender's theory, and generation of convex hull. An expert system is a computer program that uses artificial intelligence to solve problems. These systems mimic the reasoning of a human expert in a specific field, in this case a mathematical modeler. Optex helps professionals who are not experts in a subject, when a problem needs to be solved quickly, accurately and easily, as well as the design and implementation of algorithms. The expert system is specified in a database that stores the model's information and tools to process them. The expert system eliminates the complexity of algorithm programming, facilitating access to mathematical modeling by non-programming expert professionals. Expert systems were created as part of artificial intelligence but not oriented to neural networks. Mathematical modeling expert systems. A knowledge-based system, KBS, must store two types of knowledge. Mathematical components, equations, problems, models, previously used and working properly. This information is generated by the modeler who builds the mathematical models and their entire operating environment, and results of previous runs to speed up the solution of new problems. This information is generated by the math models when they are used, and correspond to the trajectories of the variables involved in these models. The use of this information is totally dynamic, since it depends on the value of the input parameters in each new run. Optex hires artificial intelligence to develop artificial brains. It is oriented to make high-complexity large-scale mathematical models without programming. The models are built in a modular way, as if they were a Lego set, which are formed by a compatible system of equations, the Lego parts, for all models. To build an artificial brain, the work to be done is monumental, and it is utopian to think that a superior being, when building a human brain, would do it manually. The first thing he should have developed is the algorithm that produces human beings automatically. In the same way, you can't aspire to build an artificial brain if you don't have the artificial intelligence that produces artificial brains. HI has Optex, the cognitive robot that produces artificial brains. The artificial brains have been designed, following the conceptual results presented in the reports conducted by neuroscience experts. In the process, the similarity between a human brain and an artificial brain for an organization has been discovered in every aspect. If you look at the problem of building a brain, the first big problem to face is the architecture of the cortex, hundreds of millions of connections of human neurons. In the artificial cortex, there will be hundreds of millions of connections of mathematical superneurons, in which each neuron must be built according to the type of function it must fulfill. The science of decision-making using digital computers emerged in 1947 and can be attributed to George Dantzig. HI considers Optex, optimization expert system, the state-of-the-art for implementing highly complex model algorithms. The AI in which artificial brains are located, HI calls it artificial intelligence for decision-making. Optex, optimization expert system. Optex is an optimization technology aimed at producing artificial brains as the technological and logical evolution of current decision support systems moved by humans to enterprise-wide optimization systems, moved by robots, called EWOS. Optex is the artificial intelligence produced by HI, which manufactures EWOS, for Industry 4.0. The expert system is the basis of Optex's generative artificial intelligence, which eliminates programming in the production process of solutions for the end user. As its name says, it stores the information given by an expert, in this case a mathematical modeler. Due to the nature of mathematics, being an exact science, it cannot have errors or inconsistencies. This means that if it is explored by a GPT AI, it should always give the same answers. Optex is a generative artificial intelligence that can produce infinite lines of perfect source code in seconds. Optex replaces a battalion of programmers with a cognitive robot, which interprets the expert system. The interested party is invited to watch the video. Making high-complexity large-scale mathematical models without programming. 1,000 of brains. One of the scientists who has most influenced HI's work is Jeff Hawkins through his publications, such as Why Does the Neocortex Have Layers and Columns? A Theory of Learning the 3D Structure of the World, and his book 1,000 of Brains, in which Hawkins presents a vision of artificial neural networks based on neuroscientific studies. 1,000 Brains Theory of Intelligence implies Multiple models of an object, each model depends on a point of view. All models work cooperatively to identify the object, or situation. The identification starts from the sampling process, and progresses until it finds that all the models converge, that is, they agree, and at that moment the object, or the situation, has been identified, and the process is done through the flow of information in the neocortical regions. Another important contribution of Hawkins is related to the multiple brain models of the same object working cooperatively. For example, to recognize an object, 5 models of that object can intervene, each of them generated by one of the senses that the human being enjoys. Complete knowledge occurs when the knowledge generated by all models in all layers are integrated. Hawkins' ideas led to the creation of the multi-Benders decomposition algorithm, MBD, whose coordination is like that carried out in many companies where central planning must comply with multiple planning dimensions, which must be attended simultaneously by multiple divisions, or departments. From a parallel computing standpoint, each subproblem can be associated with a core configuration, or CPU, that simultaneously generates asynchronous information to solve a common problem, such as the human brain. High has integrated Hawkins' concepts into artificial brains. The greatest advantage of mathematical artificial neurons is that they represent clearly defined objects within a system, that communicate with each other through fully known mathematical laws, and that they comply with laws with transitivity and divisibility laws, in such a way that a system can be atomized, to the level of knowledge that the scientist on duty has. This process leads to the atomization of the system, so that a problem of large dimensionality becomes a large number of problems of very low dimensionality. Within a nervous system, a neuron is an electrically excitable cell that fires electrical signals called action potentials through a neural network. The neuron is the main component of nervous tissue in all animals. Neurons communicate with other cells through synapses, specialized connections that commonly use minute amounts of chemical neurotransmitters, to pass the electrical signal from the presynaptic neuron to the target cell, across the synaptic gap. Neurons are highly specialized for the processing and transmission of cellular signals. Given their diversity of functions performed in different parts of the nervous system, there is a wide variety in their shape, size, and electrochemical properties. For instance, the soma of a neuron can vary from 4 to 100 micrometers in diameter. An artificial neuron is a mathematical function conceived as a model of biological neurons. Artificial neurons are elementary units in an artificial neural network. The artificial neuron receives one or more inputs, representing excitatory postsynaptic potentials and inhibitory postsynaptic potentials at neural dendrites, and sums them to produce an output, or activation, representing a neuron's action potential which is transmitted along its axon. Usually each input is separately weighted, and the sum is passed through a nonlinear function known as an activation function, or transfer function. The transfer functions usually have a sigmoid shape, but they may also take the form of other nonlinear functions, piecewise linear functions, or step functions. They are also often monotonically increasing, continuous, differentiable, and bounded. An artificial neural net is based on a collection of connected artificial neurons, which loosely model the neurons of a biological brain. Each connection, like the synapses in a biological brain, can transmit a signal to other neurons. An artificial neuron receives signals, then processes them, and can send to neurons connected to it. The signal at a connection is a real number, and the output of each neuron is computed by some nonlinear function of the sum of its inputs. The connections are called edges. Neurons and edges typically have a weight that adjusts as learning proceeds. The weight increases or decreases the strength of the signal at a connection. Neurons may have a threshold such that a signal is sent only if the aggregate signal crosses the threshold. Defining parameters and topology is a combination of empirical work and scientific work, but there is no mathematical theory that must be respected. The algorithmic process is cyclical, and its convergence is based on the minimization of errors. Starting from the traditional artificial neuron, to build artificial brains, High has created a new type of neuron. This new type of neuron will be called mathematical artificial neuron. Its name was derived from the fact that the neuron is built, based on mathematical models that represent a system, and that it does contains logical or intuitive elements. The mathematical artificial neuron is a mathematical model, presumably of optimization, which results from the partitioning and decomposition of a monolithic problem into an atomized model, following the mathematical laws of large-scale mathematical modeling. Two mathematical artificial neurons communicate with each other, forming a network of mathematical artificial neurons. Communication occurs in two directions between the two neurons. The communication protocol between the two neurons is defined by mathematical laws developed to solve atomized problems. The modeler can choose the protocol, but not the communication process, which for optimization is based on the scientific laws of duality theory, and for equilibrium problems in mathematical programming with equilibrium constraints, PEC, methodologies. A mathematical neuron represents a robot, which can communicate with another robot, autonomously, since it knows the mathematical rules that it must respect. This is what happens in the human brain, where autonomic systems communicate with each other to make decisions. Like all mathematics, theory is cadent, and for those of us who already work in high-complexity mathematical modeling, it is the logical step we must take. It's just widening the look, and thinking a little outside the box. The mathematical artificial neuron is a mathematical superstructure, representing a complete system. A mathematical artificial neuron network can be a neuron of a larger mathematical artificial neuron network. This law of transitivity is typical of large-scale modeling. This process can be repeated, until the smallest mathematical artificial neurons, the atoms of the system, are obtained. A large-scale system can be represented by a mathematical artificial neuron, and covers multiple subsystems, where each of them can be represented by a mathematical artificial neuron. Using large-scale methodologies, the mathematical artificial neuron can be divided into two, or more, mathematical artificial neurons, forming a mathematical network of artificial neurons. This process can be repeated, until the smallest mathematical artificial neurons, the atoms of the system, are obtained. The diagram presents the hierarchical structure of decomposition and partition of an oil and gas company. The structure presented is similar to that of the cerebral cortex, and based on mathematical artificial neurons, any system can be represented, in a similar way to large-scale optimization models. This representation is made based on a network of mathematical artificial neurons, and could be further divided until it reaches the atoms of the system, indivisible mathematical artificial neurons. 1,000 of brains. An artificial hypothalamus is a network of mathematical artificial neurons. Each of them represents a system or subsystem. The difference with large-scale methodologies is that the solution is visualized as specialized communications between mathematical problems, while in the artificial hypothalamus the process is cooperative based on autonomy, distributed, and real-time processing. In addition, there is a standardized language for communications between mathematical artificial neurons. The parallel processing is how the human brain faces reality, using multiple models of reality, acting permanently in parallel, to make decisions. This means that a mathematical model of a system is composed of multiple problems, related to multiple subsystems, which gives rise to enterprise optimization. Hai's research has covered the development of a mathematical language between robots, based on the theory of duality, which is a mathematical law that systems must comply with in the real world. This language is supported by studies by many scientists, starting with Joseph Louis Lagrange in 1978. This gives rise to what Hai calls autonomous distributed optimization, in real time. Any type of organization can be represented following these principles. The case of a poultry production system is presented. The system has been divided into 6 subsystems, which together make up the poultry production system. As a standard configuration, Hai proposes to use a CPU-S cluster, without edge computing components. Generative Pre-trained Transformers, GPT, are a family of neural network models that uses the transformer architecture, and is a key advancement in artificial intelligence, powering generative AI applications such as ChatGPT. GPT models give applications the ability to create human-like text and content, images, music, and more, and answer questions conversationally. Organizations across industries are using GPT models and generative AI for conda, text digesting, content generation, and search bots. Large language model is an artificial intelligence system that understands and generates human language, like GPT. Another research project is OpText GPT, which aims to generate an LMM model for OpText that would transform its input and output. OpText GPT will be a specialized generative artificial intelligence to work in the OpText optimization expert system environment, which will be powered by mathematical models that exist in the current OpText database, and of all new models that will be introduced. Technical documentation that supports OpText, and the mathematical models developed, and general technical information. On the other hand, from this knowledge information, OpText GPT will help the user build new mathematical models. Several GPT models will be developed, in order to serve users with different levels of experience. Artificial brains. A new way of thinking about artificial intelligence. Albert Einstein said, "Imagination is more important than knowledge. Knowledge is limited, imagination encircles the world." Thank you for your attention.